Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Well, CES is behind us now, and while a lot of products looked impressive under those bright showroom lights, most of us know that the real test is how they hold up in an actual home setup. One of the demos that really stood out to me this year was NexiGo's Aurora Pro MKII ultra short throw projector. They had it set up side by side with the original Mark I, and the difference in black levels and contrast was immediately noticeable. So naturally, I wanted to get one in my own space and see if those improvements held up outside the CES showroom. Spoiler, they mostly did. Let's start with what this thing is. The Aurora Pro Mark II is NexiGo's follow-up to the original Mark I. It's a 4K ultra short throw projector that uses a 0.47-inch DLP chip paired with a tricolor RGB laser light engine. It hits 2400 ANSI lumens, and while we'll talk about real-world brightness later, I can say up front that it puts out a bright image even in moderately lit rooms. It supports just about every HDR format you'd want: HDR10, HDR10+, HLG, Dolby Vision, and yes, it even supports 3D playback with DLP link glasses. One change you'll notice right away is the improved throw ratio. You now get the same screen size with the projector a little closer to the wall. At just under 3 inches, you're getting an 80-inch image. Want a 120-inch screen? You'll need about 10 inches. And if you got the wall space or a proper screen, the Mark II can go up to 150 inches. NexiGo also increased the laser life from 25,000 hours on the Mark I to 30,000 hours on the Mark II. But let's talk about the big upgrade here, because it's a big deal. NexiGo introduced what they're calling the Scene Adapt engine. That gets you two features: a mechanical iris and dynamic laser dimming. If you used higher end home projectors before, you already know what this can do for black levels. The iris works by physically opening or closing the lens aperture depending on the brightness of the scene. When you hit a dark scene, it closes down to help deepen the blacks. Then there's laser dimming, which adjusts the laser's light output in real time based on the video signal. When it comes to the design, it hasn't changed much from the Mark I. It still has a modern look with a dark gray finish and rounded edges. There's some subtle RGB LED lighting on the front that gives it a bit of personality when powering on or off, but you can disable that in the settings. It's relatively compact, measuring 21.6 inches wide, just over 16 inches deep, and under 5 inches tall. And at 22 pounds, it's easy to reposition if you need to. Underneath, there's adjustable feet to help fine-tune your image alignment if your surface isn't perfectly level. Around the back, you'll find 3 HDMI 2.1 ports, including one with eARC support. It also has 3 USB 2.0 ports, Ethernet, optical audio out, and a 3.5mm jack. Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.2 are built in as well. For audio, NexiGo integrated a 4-speaker system, 2 15-watt woofers, and 2 15-watt tweeters, and it supports Dolby Atmos and DTS HD. The remote is pretty nice. It has a built-in motion sensor that activates the backlight when you pick it up. It works over Bluetooth and infrared, so you've got some flexibility depending on how you're using the projector. The native UI is clean and simple, with basic input switching and settings management. It's not the flashiest OS, but it gets the job done. For most users, I'd recommend going with an external device. Apple TV, Fire Stick, whatever works for you. Setup is relatively painless. It's a manual focus system with both 4-point and 8-point digital keystone correction. Though I always recommend avoiding digital correction when possible, since it degrades image quality. In the settings section, you have quite a few picture modes, such as Standard, Cinema Home, Cinema Pro, which is the one I would recommend using, Custom, Gaming Mode, and Brightest. From there, you have your standard brightness, contrast, and saturation settings. There's also sharpness and hue settings. Below that is your advanced color management for blue, cyan, magenta, and yellow. Then you have your color settings, which include Warm 1, Standard, Warm 2, and Warm 3. I would recommend sticking with Warm 1. Under that, you have your 2-point white balance as well as your gamma settings. Hopping out of the image parameters, you'll find your 11-point white balance followed by your audio settings, which you'll have different options for, such as Cinema, Standard, Gaming, Dolby Cinema, and Custom. I prefer Dolby Cinema in my room. Now under the Scene Adapt engine, this is where you'll find your settings for the dynamic iris. There's an iris bright as well as an iris dark. There's also your SAE scene settings, which I'll touch on in the performance section. And that's a super quick rundown of the settings section. I tested it with a 120-inch ALR screen from about 10 feet back. Now let's talk about image quality, because this is where the projector really starts to separate itself. The native contrast ratio measured 3,678 to 1. That's already pretty good for a DLP-based UST, but once you engage the dynamic iris and laser dimming, that number jumps to just under 31,700 to 1. What this means is black levels were deep and you get a nice punchy picture. Iris bright mode paired with SAE1 ended up being my go-to. SAE2 was a little too aggressive, it started clipping some detail, while SAE1 gave me that deeper black without sacrificing too much brightness or detail. I did notice a small amount of flickering with the iris engaged, but nothing I'd call distracting. Laser speckle was nearly non-existent. Even on challenging content, like solid red backgrounds for example, it was difficult to see unless you were actively looking for it. That's not something I can say about all RGB laser projectors, so hats off to NexiGo there. In terms of raw brightness, I measured 2,158 ANSI lumens in its uncalibrated brightest mode. After calibration in Cinema Pro mode, that number came down to about 1,758 lumens. Still plenty for most rooms, especially if you're pairing it with a decent ALR screen. Colors are vibrant and accurate. When there's a wide range of saturated colors and contrast-heavy scenes, the Mark II handled it beautifully. Fan noise is noticeable, but never disruptive. I measured around 42 dB in HDR mode. SAE modes 2 and 3 do increase fan activity slightly, but I wouldn't call it distracting unless you're sitting really close to it. Gaming on the Mark II is surprisingly solid. Input lag measured 17.6 milliseconds at 4K 60 Hz. Not gaming monitor levels, but for a projector, that's pretty excellent. Audio is decent for built-in speakers. No, it's not going to compete with even a basic soundbar setup, but the dual woofer system adds enough body to avoid the usual tinny sound you get from most projectors. Dialogue is clear, treble stays smooth, and there's enough bass response to add some weight to explosions and music. So bottom line, does the Aurora Pro Mark II live up to what I saw at CES? Absolutely. In fact, in a controlled environment, it performs even better than I expected. The black levels are a real highlight, and NexiGo's combination of iris control and dynamic dimming isn't just marketing. It actually works. At $3,499, I think it offers one of the best price to performance ratios out there for a triple laser ultra short throw projector. And based on what I've seen so far, it definitely earns an AVS Forum top choice for 2025. If you got questions about this projector, drop it in the comments. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next one.